Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Cecilia Health webinar, where we'll be talking about the advanced diabetes nutrition and just taking our nutrition to the next level. I'm Emily. I'm one of the Cecilia Health coaches. And if you have any problems today, you'll see the phone number at the bottom of your screen that says 1-800 263 6317. Thank you all again for joining us. So this webinar, it is meant to be an interactive program. So our presenter, Sally Kate, will be doing a short presentation, and there will be time at the end for some discussion. You will see on the toolbar here on your right, there is a question tab dropdown. So if you think of a question, go ahead and enter it in there, and she will have time at the very end to answer your questions, or if there's anything that you want her to talk a bit more about. And just as a disclaimer as well, we know that the information you are about to hear might motivate you to make some changes, but please do talk to your doctor before making any changes to your current routine. This online Q&A session is intended to give general advice. This information is not a substitute for personal medical advice and involves the professional opinion of the Cecilia Health Certified Diabetes Care and Education Specialist. So thank you again. And here, as we welcome our presenter today, Sally Kate Collins is a registered dietitian and a certified diabetes care and education specialist. She has experience working with patients who have diabetes, high blood pressure, weight loss, and chronic kidney disease for the past 9 years. She lives in Mississippi with her family, and in her free time, she enjoys spending time with her kids, cheering on Ole Miss, sports, volunteering, and traveling as well. So thank you all again for joining us. And here's Sally Kate. Thanks, Sally Kate.
Thanks, Emily. Okay, so today I'm going to go over what is a carbohydrate, where are they found, do I need to think about other nutrients other than carbs, what is the glycemic index, how do I read a food label, what about fiber? Are different sugar substitutes safe? How do I manage my diabetes using carb counting? And then we'll have some time for questions as well. So we've got a lot of topics that we're going to go over today, but just to kind of start with the basics, food is made up of three main nutrients. So we have protein, fat, and carbohydrates in our food. And a lot of times we kind of put those in different, like everything that's a protein food is a protein food, and everything that's a fat's a fat food, and everything's carb, like you can see here that we've got them listed out that way. But some foods are going to have multiple different, may have all three of them in there as well. And we'll talk about that here shortly and what that impact might have as well. So what is a carbohydrate? Carbohydrates are the main nutrient in a food that raises your blood sugar levels. The amount and type of carbohydrate that you eat is going to determine how quickly your blood sugar levels change after eating. And so they can come from liquids like juices and soft drinks, and those typically are going to be converted into blood sugar much more quickly than something that's a solid food like pasta or fruits that have the skin still on them, think like apples. They're going to be slower to convert to blood sugar. And then there's also foods that don't have any carbohydrates. So they're going to have much lower impact on blood sugar, if any at all. So those are going to include your non-starchy vegetables, think like cabbage, carrots, asparagus, cucumber, butter, eggs, meat, poultry, and fish, cheese, and nuts. And so a lot of times we're not going to eat one food or one nutrient at a time. So this is what I meant by some foods are going to have multiple of those macronutrients in them. And that can impact your blood sugar as well in different ways. Like it may cause your blood sugar to be absorbed more, like the nutrients from your food to be absorbed more slowly. And that can cause your blood sugar to increase more slowly. So if you're having a mixed meal, if you're having how much fat or protein, that can impact your blood sugar as well. Like a burger on a bun with a salad is going to raise your blood sugar a lot more slowly than just the bun alone would, because there's fat in there, there's more fiber as well, and protein. So what is the glycemic index now? So how does that how does that play a role in what I'm eating and how that impacts my blood sugar as well? So the glycemic index is going to tell us how quickly a carbohydrate will impact my blood sugar. Only carb foods are going to be included in this glycemic index. You can have foods that are high on the glycemic index, medium, and low. If you think about high glycemic index foods, these are going to raise your blood sugars within as little as 15 minutes. If you think about the low glycemic index, they're going to be a much more slow impact on your blood sugar. So I think of low and slow at the same time. The low impact and slow impact on your blood sugars. Then how is the glycemic index useful in making food choices? So when you're choosing more foods that are low in the glycemic index, that can be helpful as they can raise your blood sugar levels less and more gradually. So you're more likely to feel fuller longer after those foods that are lower in the glycemic index than foods that are high in the glycemic index. So if you're choosing high glycemic index foods, you need to monitor your blood sugar after you're eating them, and you can kind of see how much the impact on your blood sugar, what that might look like for you. All right, and so the next thing I want to look at is how to read a food label. What we're going to look at, the first thing is serving size. Now, serving size is not the same as portion. You may portion a certain amount of food on your plate, but that's not necessarily the serving size. The serving size on a nutrition label has to do with how much nutrients are listed on the label, depending on how much how large the serving size is. So you can see here that the serving size is a half a cup, and the calories that are listed here are 90 calories in a half a cup of a serving. Then here on this label, it has limit these nutrients that are all in this orange section. These are just these are just the nutrients that you want to be more mindful of how much of that you're having, because they can have more impact on your health. Like higher cholesterol foods can impact different fat content in your blood as well, and sodium can sometimes cause you to retain more fluid and have an impact on your blood pressure. And then one like little trick you can use though on a nutrition label is if you look at this percentage of daily value, I wouldn't suggest you adding all of your percentages of daily value and do I meet 100% of what I need to have for all day, but you can use it as a guide. If there is 5% or less, this food is considered low in that nutrient. So if it's 5% or less of sodium, you can know this is a low sodium food.
Sally Kate?
Yes.
Okay, I hear you now. Great.
Um, the Can you hear me? You're good?
Yes, I hear you
Okay,
now.
okay,
Thank you.
sorry. Hopefully it didn't cut out too much. So when you're looking at a food label, you can look at the ingredients list, and they're always listed in descending order from what's most in the food to the least. So if you are looking at, let's say, whole wheat bread, for instance, you can see that if whole grain is like whole wheat flour or whole grain flour is listed as the first ingredient in that bread, then that's a whole grain product. Versus if it just says wheat flour, that may be a more refined flour. And you can kind of see what nutrient is what ingredient rather, what's the most in that in food product, whether it's bread or granola bars or whatever it is, and what's the least. So you can kind of see kind of what's the how much sugar in comparison to other ingredients also are included. What about fiber? So fiber is a type of carbohydrate, just like sugars and starches, but it's not broken down by the body and doesn't contribute any calories. So on a food label, it's listed there under the total carbohydrates. list. You can see it there where it says total carbohydrates, and then dietary fiber is listed, and then sugars. Sugars and fiber are both different kinds of carbohydrates, so they're going to be listed under total there. And what about sugar substitutes? So there are a couple of different common sugar substitutes that we use. Equal, Splenda, Sweet and Low. There's a few different stevia options. For the most part, they're not going to impact your blood sugar levels. Sometimes with Splenda, you can, depending on how much of it that you're having. Sometimes when we're baking, we add a larger amount, and they can impact your blood sugar slightly, a slight tiny amount. But for the most part, sugar substitutes, they pack a big punch for not a lot. So you don't have to use as much volume of sugar substitutes as you would actual sugar when you're sweetening something. And then there's also natural sugar substitutes known as sugar alcohols. They're typically less sweet than sugar, and they provide half the calories. Now we're going to go into carb counting, which some people feel is a little bit overwhelming, but it can be used with anyone with diabetes. But it's really helpful if you are when you're dosing rapid acting mealtime insulin, such as Novolog or Humalog. When you're carb counting, a couple of helpful tools that you might want to use are measuring cups or a food scale, rather. You can use an app or a reference book to look up the carb content of various foods for foods that don't have nutrition labels included. So over here you can see that Calorie King is the option that's listed as that might be a good book to use as a reference. I also like the Calorie King app on your phone. It's a free app that you can download that you can use that as a reference when you're on the go. And then if you have a food label, you can use that as well. But before you're eating, you want to measure or weigh whatever portion you're having, so you can kind of use that as a guide with the nutrition label. And then you look up the grams of carbs that the portion has in the app or the food label or whatever you're using for your reference. If you're not taking the rapid acting mealtime insulin, you can kind of try to be consistent with how much of the carbs you're having each day. So not necessarily the same foods, but just the same amount of carbohydrates. And then if you are taking rapid acting insulin, you can speak with your doctor about dosing your insulin based on how much carbohydrates you're having. And if you wanted to really play around with it, you can check your blood sugars 2 hours after your meals, and you can determine kind of how much impact those carbs are having on your blood sugar and kind of what's the perfect amount for you. And that's something that you can work with your diabetes educator and your doctor about. So for instance, if we're looking at apple and a peanut butter as a snack, ways how you would implement carb counting in this snack, you could weigh the apple and it weighs 3 ounces. You can measure the peanut butter. Let's say you're having 2 tablespoons. And then if you look at the reference book, it tells you that a 3-ounce apple has 15 grams of carbs. And then the label on your jar of peanut butter tells you that 2 tablespoons provides 6 grams of carbs. So you'd add those two together. 15 plus 6 is 21 grams. And a good range of carbs for snacks is between 15 and 30 grams of carbs. So you would be right there. This is a perfect snack that provides some healthy fats and fiber and some protein as well. Then if we're looking at a possible meal of chicken breast, rice, broccoli, and some pudding, how you would implement carb counting in this meal, you could measure your portion of rice. So maybe it's 2/3 of a cup. Then you would measure your broccoli, and that might be a cup. Then you can measure the pudding. Let's say it's a half a cup, and that may even be like a snack pack kind of cup. You may not even have to measure it because it could be providing just there on the nutrition label. And then chicken is a protein and it has no carbohydrates. So let's say we open up our Calorie King app and it tells us that 1/3 of a cup of rice would be 15 grams of carbs. So if I'm having 2/3 of a cup, I would double that. So that would end up being 30 grams of carbs since you're having twice that serving size. So 30 grams of carbs for the rice. And then the app tells you a cup of broccoli is 6 grams of carbs. And then the pudding label said a half a cup of pudding is 25.
Sally Kate, we lost your voice again.
Oh
No, I
no.
hear you now. I hear you now.
Okay, okay.
What?
I don't know what's happening with our connection, but we'll get through this, guys. So it would be 30 grams for the rice, 6 grams for the broccoli, 25 for the pudding, and then none for the chicken, and that's 61 grams total for that meal. So we're just going to add it all up there. All right. So and here's a couple of tricks that I really like. You don't typically eat the same foods all the time. I mentioned that earlier. But once you've measured and you have calculated the carbs, you don't need to do it again each time. So as long as you're just like eating the same amount. So one thing you could do, if you know that you are typically eating cereal out of the same bowl at home, you could pour a bowl of cereal, pour the cereal you're having, your Special K, your Fiber One, your Fruit Loops, whatever it is, Honey Nut Cheerios. Pouring that into the bowl, and then you can even measure it after that before you put in the milk. And then you can see, all right, when I typically pour in this amount of cereal into my bowl, it will end up being about a cup and a half. And you can determine how many grams of carbs are in that amount of cereal for my bowl when I pour it into that line in the bowl. And then measure out how much milk you'd put in there as well. And then once a month, you can go back and you can eyeball it after that, but then maybe once a month you do it again. So that way you're ensuring that you're accurate still in your estimated portion size. And it's not like that bowl is growing or decreasing with how much you're having. So you can be more consistent that way. And then many foods have a food label, so it's really easy to kind of look it up. Like for instance, if like with the pudding pack I was mentioning, if you just kind of looked on there, granola bars are another great option, or protein bars. And then for fresh foods, it to weigh it would be the best idea when you're first starting out, and you can get a really inexpensive one of those from just like Walmart or any dollar kind of store. But for fresh foods, if you weigh it, because typically most people don't know what 3 ounces of an apple might look like unless they've weighed multiple and they can kind of judge it that way. But the big thing is don't get overwhelmed thinking you're going to need to measure every single thing every time you eat when you carb count, because once you've measured it at one point, you typically are able to kind of gauge it by your eyesight. Okay, so today, in today's presentation, you should have gained more knowledge and understanding of the following concepts. What foods contain carbohydrates. So we've got our starchy foods, such as bread, rice, pasta, fruits, some dairy products like milk and yogurt, and then foods that are sweetened with sugar as well. And then what is the glycemic index? What are important things to read on a food label, and how does fiber affect my health and diabetes, and what sugar substitutes would be safe to use, and how do I count carbohydrates to better control my blood sugars? So hopefully y'all feel a little bit clearer about all of those things. And now we can go ahead and ask any questions you may have. Like right here, this little pop out here shows you where you can type in any questions that you may have as well. Here in the chat. And while y'all are, if anyone's trying to think of any and they want to go over, I can, a couple of questions that sometimes I have patient ask is, all right, so do I need to cut out all of my carbs? Absolutely not. So carbohydrates are going to be the nutrient that our bodies need to run. That's how we get energy. And so we want to make sure that we are getting some carbohydrates at our snacks and our meals so that we have energy. It's just going to be about how much that we have. When we have trouble controlling our blood sugars, we need to be mindful of portions that we're having. So that's why being aware of what carbs are in your food can be helpful sometimes. And carb counting is a great way for you to monitor that as well. thinking about that and kind of what foods may be more impactful on your blood sugar than others. You may have come across someone that's told you, oh, you can't have bananas or you can't have watermelon now that you have diabetes. That's not necessarily the truth. Now, are fruits foods that have carbohydrates? Yes. So potentially you don't want to have just the largest mixing bowl in your house full of those things. But having those in smaller portions, using the carb counting, using the app to kind of determine how much of it that you need to have, that those are all helpful methods to control your portion of how much of the fruit that you're having as well.
Well, thank you so much, Sally Kate,
Yeah.
for presenting today. We really hope that with this conversation, that it's just been maybe some new concepts to you all, that you can, continue that conversation as well. Here in August and September, we do continue to have our webinars. Next month is all about blood sugars with that. So, if you're just wanting more information about that, please check that out. And then here in September, we do a heart healthy month with that. Again, great conversations to be have there. If you are wanting additional information, you can also check out our Facebook page, or you can also talk to your Cecilia Health coach as well, and they'll be able to help you navigate any questions that you have as well with that. But we just want to thank you again so much on behalf of Cecilia Health for your time today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.